Russian language excluded from Kyiv state schooling.
Here's a summary of the article.
Kyiv City Council has completely excluded the Russian language from being taught as part of the curricula at municipal institutions of preschool and general secondary education. According to the Kyiv City Council's press service, Kyiv City Council held a vote on Thursday, November 10, in which 64 local lawmakers of the 120-member council approved the exclusion of Russian language from local schooling. According to local lawmaker Vadim Vasilchuk, who is also chairman of the Standing Committee on Education and Science, Family, Youth, and Sports, in the current conditions of war with the Russian Federation, it is inappropriate and incorrect to conduct the educational process and study of Russian in preschool and general secondary education institutions that belong to the communal property of the territorial community of Kyiv. Russian leaders have stated repeatedly that Russia reaches as far as the Russian language is spread. In this regard, the Deputy Corps of Kyiv City Council has adopted a decision that will enable it to avoid escalation of tension in society and step up protection of the educational space of Kyiv from the hybrid influences of the aggressor state. Language does matter, and in wartime it is a matter of national security, Vasilchuk said. He added that the decision provides for carrying out organizational and legal actions to transitional groups and classes from Russian to Ukrainian, the state language. Kyiv City Council also plans to introduce a moratorium on the public use of Russian-language cultural products in the capital. At the end of June, Odessa region and the city of Mykolaiv removed Russian from their school curriculum.
This post received a score of 16,000, with an upvote ratio of 93%. Here are the top comments in response to this article.
Some of my Ukrainian friends have a joke that they actually speak Rustian better than Ukrainian. Guess that'll be a thing of the past, but Russia only has itself to blame.
I grew up in Odessa, and spoke Russian 99% of the time. The 1% was mandatory Ukrainian literature classes. Regardless, I am 100% Ukrainian and will always identify as such. There's one episode of Servant of the People where the Minister of Foreign Affairs has to speak Ukrainian because the German diplomat does, and he's completely awful at it.
That's amazing, haha. Is the show worth checking out?
It's really good. Basic rundown: Zelensky is a high school history teacher. One day he goes on a big rant about how awful the government is. A student sees him, records it, puts it online, goes viral, and he's elected president based purely on this. It's a really good fish out of water story.
This second season took a pretty big genre turn.
In a good way or bad? I'm about 2/3 of the way through the first season and starting to lose interest. I'm only watching it because of Zelensky at this point, and I'm hoping the storylines improve.
I think this was a joke about him really being elected. Probably should have called it the fourth season, since there are 3 of the television show.
I understand why, but this is much larger than just language. Russian is rooted into Ukraine quite a bit, to the point where even families from somewhere like Kyiv speak Russian instead of Ukrainian. There's also a mix of both languages that developed in more rural areas, Syrzhyk. This mix is usually regarded as improper Ukrainian and often looked down upon. You also need to understand the cultural results of such drastic change.
For me, I found hearing Ukrainian is like listening to those "how English sounds in or another language" type videos, where it sounds like English Russian, but it's not quite right for it. I'm sure had I grown up back home, and not during a petty war, I'd understand the nuances and differences better.
So like English compared to Scottish?
Like watching Brad Pitt in Snatch.
Can't believe it took this long. That's how Russia keeps claiming territory by referring to Russian speakers as Russians.
Mostly because politicians were afraid to lose poll numbers from the east where people mostly speak Russian. I lived in Odessa and people would talk to me in Russian even if I talked to them in Ukrainian. At this point, I just ignore any comment I see on Ukrainian media that is in Russian and remove the Russian languages from my keyboard settings. Some banking apps removed the Russian interface.
This video was automatically created by Reddit to speech. The article and comments in this video were selected from Reddit according to their upvotes, and any paraphrasing was performed by smmry.com, without any human intervention.